At the beginning of 2024, Steamboat Willie and the version of Mickey Mouse that appears in it went into the public domain, and this film was announced the very next day. And it wasn't the only one. There have already been, at least 3 Mickey Mouse slashers so far in just the last year, and how many are we going to get going forward, along with Popeye, and Winnie the Pooh, and Peter Pan, and Bambi, and Pinocchio, and all of these other public domain cheap horror films. Look, you know what I'm going to say about this film. I knew what it was going to be like before I saw it. I know you're not under the impression that I'm here to sing its praises. That's just not going to happen. I still hate this entire concept of banking on well-known names to get your cheap, generic horror movie into theaters, and not a single one of these movies so far has been anywhere near good enough to justify this recent trend. I haven't watched the Popeye ones. Maybe they're incredible hidden gems. Who knows? But we're here to talk about Screamboat, and it is not the worst of these types of films that I have seen. So there are actually places where I want to give credit where it's due. There were a couple things that had me a little bit more interested in this one compared to others. One being that the mouse is played by David Howard Thornton, who of course is Art the Clown. He brings a ton of life and fun and energy to Art, and so I'm excited to see him do anything else as well. And while this character is not on that level, it's nice to see a villain who is pretty expressive. You have other versions of this type of movie where it's just a dude in a mask, and it's literally the cheapest interpretation of the concept that is possible. So to see him giggling and sounding like Mickey Mouse and kind of laughing like him and doing his little dances and making these weird little noises and these crazy faces, that's at least a step up from other movies that tackle similar things, and so it's nice to have somebody like David Howard Thornton in the role. Again, this does not approach what he does with Art the Clown. This does not make this mouse a horror icon, but it's better than it would have been if you had somebody who isn't as good at that type of thing. The other reason I was a little more curious about this one is because he's actually mouse-sized. Well, sort of. His size is actually really inconsistent throughout the movie, but he's small. And once again, you have many of these movies that just take the approach of having like a dude and that's it. Whether it's just a guy wearing a mask or it's meant to be Winnie the Pooh like in Blood and Honey, but it may as well just be a guy wearing a mask for all it's worth. These movies take themselves so seriously, and I don't think that's the right approach at all, because it's an inherently ridiculous concept, taking things like Winnie the Pooh and turning them into slashers. It's absurd, and when you just treat it like a generic, straightforward horror film, you're not doing it any favors, you're not having any fun with it. And so the fact that they made him an actual tiny little mouse guy with a ridiculous design at least showed that this one is finally leaning into the absurd, goofy tone that these types of movies should have. And this one does definitely know what it is. It knows it's stupid. There are a lot of Disney references. There's a whole group of girls that are dressed like Disney princesses. There are a lot of references in the dialogue. He hums the Steamboat Willie song. I still don't think it leans as far into the absurd as it should. I mean, this is completely ridiculous, and it still tries to play many things pretty straight. Maybe the people making these films don't have the comedic chops to just really actually make it funny, which, you know, maybe some of the people behind this film could do well if they work on other things. I don't know, but it does feel to me that if your brilliant idea is, let's take Mickey Mouse but make him a slasher, like if you think that's really cool and funny, I feel like you probably don't have the comedic chops, to be honest. So I guess in certain ways this movie is a step in the right direction, although that implies there is a direction that these types of movies should be going in other than the garbage can. The main couple of actors are fine. They do a serviceable job with the ridiculous things they have to work with here. And if you're a horror fan who just wants kills, there are plenty of them, and there are some good effects. Obviously, the budget for this is not super high, but for what they had to work with, most of the kills look good. They're sufficiently bloody. Some of them are pretty absurd just because of the fact that this little mouse guy is the one doing them. So if you want the kills, they're there. There's a lot of them. There's even a little bit of nudity if you just want those base horror desires satisfied. But if you want a good movie, come on. You know this is not that. While the main actors are fine, a lot of the side cast are pretty bad. There's this group of girls, and they're all meant to be drunk and annoying. And they succeed, but oh my god. Yeah, they were just awful. There's an entire scene where they are like, how do you do the ahagao face? And then they just keep practicing doing it over and over again. It's just a whole scene of them standing there staring at the camera making this face. Oh my god. The film's attempt at humor very much falls flat. There were a couple people, a few seats over than me, cracking up, and they seem to be loving the movie. I don't get it, but good for you guys. But to me, the attempts at humor here were just awful. I appreciate some of the creativity that they used to try to make David Howard Thornton look small next to other people and other things. Again, that's a lot more effort than other movies like this have put in. The actual quality of the green screen doesn't look that great most of the time, whether it's with him or trying to make them look like they're actually on this boat out in the water, or you get these fire and these explosion effects that look really bad. There's one guy who gets his face burnt, and it looks like he just has melted cheese stuck to his face, like he just slammed his face into a piece of pizza. There's one line of dialogue in this film where the main girl says something like, "So we just have to stay here and try to survive Stuart Little?" But she doesn't say it like that. She doesn't say it as if Stuart Little are supposed to be the last words in the sentence. She says it like, so we're just supposed to stay here and try to survive Stuart Little. Like, clearly there were meant to be more words, but the movie abruptly cuts and goes silent. And I'm so curious what the rest of that line was. In this movie, of all things, what was the line that they were like, no, we can't let them hear that? Like, what was it? I have to know. Maybe she originally said, like, survive Stuart Little's bloody rampage, and it turned out they weren't allowed to say that. Like, they could reference the name Stuart Little, but they weren't allowed to say anything about Stuart Little potentially killing people. I don't know. I really don't. But it was one moment that really stood out to me on the technical side where I was like, what just happened? And it has the problems you knew it was going to have. There's barely a story here. There's a bunch of random characters on a boat. The mouse has like the most simple, basic motivation possible. There's a quick little backstory, which is delivered in the animated style of the original black and white Steamboat Willie, which was nice. It was very, very short, but it was like a little spark of life in the middle of this thing, which is only just over 90 minutes, I guess, and yet, I was getting bored. It really felt like it was dragging. There's barely a story. These characters have very little to them. They're not the worst. The side characters may be, but at least the main cast, they exist. I can give them that. They don't hurt me. They don't give me a headache, but they exist. There is an attempt at character arcs, I suppose, because the main girl wants to be a fashion designer and she's unsure if she can do it, and she's considering moving out of New York, and of course throughout this journey she'll gain confidence, and the main guy doesn't think he can be a leader, but as other members of the boat crew die, he has to step up and be a leader. But they're very tacked on because we are never given any real reasons why they feel the way that they do. Like, what have they gone through that make them think they can't do these things? We don't know. They just say at the beginning, we don't think we can do these things. And then by the end, we see that they can do those things. I suppose if you call that a character arc, you aren't technically lying. But it's not that great. That's what I'm talking about when I say you really need to lean fully into the absurd. You're already most of the way there. It's a little ugly, crazy mutant mouse man played by David Howard Thornton going around killing people on a boat. Don't even pretend to have a character arc. Like, do something really ridiculous with it. You basically need to go full-blown parody. You don't need to try to have this genuine emotional moment between these two people as if they're building a relationship that I care about. You don't need to try to have this resolution at the end of, yes, I've decided to pursue my dreams in New York City. I don't care. Do something funny with it. So once again, credit where it's due. They put more effort into this one than some other movies like this that I've seen. There's a rather large cast on this boat, so there is a lot of kills, and there's more creativity put into making David Howard Thornton seem small. But I have not seen one of these movies yet that has made me feel like the people behind it are passionate about horror, and I don't know that for sure. I cannot judge what is in their heads, but with the quality of these that I've seen so far, it seems to me that the only reason to make them is to try to capitalize on popular names in order to make money. It doesn't seem to me that somebody who is genuinely passionate about making horror would do this. And maybe if it's your way to get your foot in the door and get that money that you need to then go on and make your passion project. But you have the Pooniverse, for example, when their first movie was successful, they didn't do that. They just immediately announced like 32 more of those. So I don't know what any of these people will do next. Maybe they'll do something great. I don't know. Although they do tease a sequel. So it seems like they just want to make more of this. But with what I have seen here, I still feel like this trend absolutely needs to die. This one is better than Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey. It's better than some of the other Mickey Mouse slashers like The Mousetrap. I don't think it's as good as Blood and Honey 2 or Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare, which are not good, but this is even worse. I mean, maybe you can do unique things with Bambi and Pinocchio. I don't know. I feel like a fool for saying that. So it's cheap, it's generic, it's stupid. It at least knows that it's stupid, but it still doesn't lean far enough into that absurdity. There's not actual good comedy here. I cannot stop feeling the cynicism behind movies like this, but also, the more of them come out, the more numb to it I do begin to feel. How long will it last? I don't know. But no, I do not recommend you see Screamboat unless you're a hardcore David Howard Thornton fan. You just want to see some kills. There might be some entertainment value in there. It's not the worst of these, but in general, this needs to stop. But this was all just my opinion. I'd love to hear from you down in the comments if you've seen the film, what you think about it, whether you agree, disagree, whatever you want to talk about. Let's have a conversation down there. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please leave a like and subscribe if you would like to see more from me. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.